this video lecture, we'll review various types of qualitative data. So we'll first define what qualitative data means, and then secondly, look at some of the top sources of qualitative data that is used by political scientists. What is qualitative data? So qualitative data would be evidence that's not converted into numbers, and this is in contrast to quantitative data, where you're trying to really sum up and capture the information and the evidence that you have and put it into a data sheet. Here with qualitative data, you're not necessarily trying to put it into this data set observation format. Instead, you're looking for causal processes. And here you're looking at close range, going into detail to go at the micro level to see what those causal processes are and how they operate. Your focus is still to test hypotheses, but it's using different sources of data to do so. So let's look at some types of qualitative data that are really common. First, and this is a major staple of political science research, are interviews. So in contrast to interviewing for quantitative data, which takes the form of surveying, asking many people set questions, here you have extended interviews that may go 30 minutes, they may go an hour, they may go 2 hours, with comparatively fewer respondents. And so here you're asking people about their individual experiences and often their role in a major political process that you're interested in. And so here this is one of my interview respondents who is in charge of the Brazilian Autism Association, and I'm looking at her role in the Brazilian Health Council. This is a picture of her with the health minister. So what does she get out of the process, and what have been some of the major steps involved in consolidating that health council? So I'm looking at her experiences as one of those major players in this process. Another form of data that we use as qualitative researchers is observation of human behavior. So this is a type of data that you would use also in quantitative research, but here it takes a different form. And here we use the form of participant observation. So the observer in this sort of data collection becomes a regular participant in the activities of those being observed. They're able to view with their own eyes something that may not be captured by other sources of data. And here I have pictures from two different national participatory councils that I did research on. This is the Brazilian Health Council, and this is the Social Assistance Council in Brazil. And you can see just from these pictures and from what I observed that there's very different tenors involved in the two councils. In the Health Council, everyone loves each other. They have a strong identity about this project that they're working towards together that really holds the council together as glue and really serves as a source of resources for them when they're facing political battles. And here we see the Social Assistance Council. Relationships are much more tense. They don't have as strong of identity. This is a professional environment where they're there to get a job done, but they don't have those strong connections that can be useful in weathering storms when they're being attacked by an administration. So this is something that you may not be able to tell until you actually observe the political process. And that gives rise to new kinds of hypotheses that you might want to test and ways that this can be complemented with then interviews with the different counselors in this Brazilian Health Council or with the Social Assistance Council about how they view each other and whether this strong identity is indeed a resource or a problem for the different types of councils. So the key with participant observation is that the researcher is embedded in the organization, the movement, the party, whatever it is that they're studying, and is able to make observations that go beyond other questions that they might ask in advance or other forms of evidence that they might collect. A third form of the qualitative data that we use would be written sources, and this can take a number of different forms. So we analyze documents to look for causal process observations. Doing qualitative research doesn't necessarily have to mean that you go jetting around the world. You can use a lot of resources that we have here in our own library. So this can involve secondary sources. You look for evidence of a particular process that is interesting and fits with your hypothesis using books that people have already written. They may not be writing about your topic. In practice, They often are writing about something totally different, but they have in there evidence that may be useful for you. Or you look to newspaper archives, look to the written word that gives a documenting of what happened, who was involved, what was the order in which a political process unfolded. And you can also look at different kinds of archives from the government itself, from a political party, from an organization. Could be a civil society organization, it could be an international organization, some kind of archive that gives you information about how a process happened, or information about, say, the internal budget, about priorities, about some sort of report about what happened at a particular moment in time. So with these written sources, you're looking for evidence about what happened at key moments that you'll be looking at in your process tracing, and you'll be testing hypotheses based on this evidence that you collect. And finally, we can use written and media sources for other purposes too. So you might use these sources and do more interpretive work. As opposed to the last one, we're looking at these written sources for an accounting of what happened. Here we're using them as a basis that you'll be looking for different kinds of meaning. You'll be looking for the use of symbols, messages, and so forth. And so research on, in Bolivia, the water war of 2000 in Cochabamba, where you had massive protests against water privatization, researchers have looked at photographs from the event and looked at, say, different kinds of symbols that are used. So here we can see this is the Bolivian flag. This is something called the wifala, which is an indigenous flag. And so these different flags are used to evoke different messages about what the movement is about and what the opponents are about as well. So they're bringing in the Bolivian flag to say this is a movement about nationalism and that their opponents are against the sovereignty of the country. Also drawing on this indigenous flag to call on these ideas of indigeneity as a source of resource, of banding people together to oppose the, frankly, largely white ruling class. And so here you can look at documents that are produced by organizations, media, of various forms, and look for some evidence for something that may not simply be captured in the written word, but is more open to interpretation to back your argument.